in this episode of the Critical Oxygen Podcast.
Removing the things that are getting in the way for you to accomplish all these tasks. And those things that you can't remove are obviously probably going to be important things too.
Welcome to the Critical Oxygen Podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your endurance potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson. I have a PhD in molecular exercise physiology, and I'm the founder of Critical Oxygen, where my mission is to build better endurance athletes through remote education and in-person physiological testing. Today, I'm joined by continuing guest host, Coach Aaron Geiser, where we talk all things time management. This is something that we have noticed in both our personal lives as well as our coaching lives and our athletes' lives, is that a lot of people are inefficient with their time. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to sit down and we wanted to have a discussion about how we manage our time to be as efficient as possible and give you, the listeners, some guidelines on how to manage your time better so you can not only do your training as efficiently as possible, but then enjoy everything that life has in store for you. So we hope you enjoy this episode of the Critical Oxygen Podcast, where we talk all things time management. Aaron Geiser, welcome back to the show.
How's it going, Phil?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Shocked that I keep getting asked back.
Hey, man, if I was going to discontinue on this podcast, actually, it'd be kind of funny to just be like, yeah, sorry, Aaron, I didn't mean to invite you back today. Wrong, Aaron. You know, we got to cancel this.
I meant to email your wife.
Yeah.
She's going to be a better conversation today.
No, it's like I said, I always enjoy our conversations, and I think you do a really good job of helping individuals learn, you know, from like the true application and coaching aspect of things. Like, how can we take things and actually make our athletes better? And today's conversation, we're going to talk about something that I think kind of transcends training a little bit, and I think this is, I mean, with most aspects of training. You know, there's a lot of things you can learn from properly, you know, doing training and coaching and other things like that. And today's topic is time management. You know, not to beat around the bush. It's time management. And when you said that, I was like, man, I see so many people that I've worked with in the past, you know, who will go to the gym, you know, go to the pool, and it's like social hour for them. And then, you know, 2 hours later, they're walking out of the pool and they've swam for 30 minutes, or they've lifted, you know, like 2 sets or done, you know, something like that. And you're like I understand, you know, like for some people, right, doing that sort of thing is social hour. But if you're truly trying to maximize, you know, like training potential and adaptations and other things like that, learning what it is that can allow you to get into your workout, get into your sets faster, be efficient with your time within those sets, along with, you know, what other things you can do within your life to balance everything that's going on, right? Work, life, you know, family stuff, relationship stuff, friends if you have them, you know, those sort of things.
I don't have that problem.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I keep a small circle, so that's my time management tip for today. Is just don't have any friends, and you'll be fine. And then, you know, how do you balance all that though? Like that's the biggest thing. So, for you, like what sort of inefficiencies do you see, you know, like not to call anybody out particularly, but like within your athletes in terms of trends that you really think, you know, they could work on in order to become better at managing their time?
I mean, to be honest, there's probably 50 different things I could go over during this conversation. So to kind of drive into the real point is, just like you set up a plan for your work day, you have to set up a plan for your workout day as well. And I will say, especially as I started to get a lot busier, bless you.
Thank you.
I was thinking of the Seinfeld episode where they say, "You are so good looking," instead of saying "bless you." But most people, they look at me like, "What the hell?"
I also, that if you wouldn't have told me it was from Seinfeld, I wouldn't have been able to guess that probably in a million years.
So I avoid that. But everybody else that does watch Seinfeld, you know what I'm talking about, and you probably had a good laugh, so you're welcome. But Back to that. It's scheduling sessions. And a lot of the times I try to schedule workouts that have a certain amount of time. So typically if I do a run, I try to give you the amount of time that you're going to be, or a bike you're going to be, it's an hour and 45 minutes, or it's 75 minutes, or whatever it might be, allowing you to kind of build this into your calendar. And so many people, I feel like, just don't necessarily think, okay, well, I have these 5 calls for work, I have this office work that I need to do, this leaves this amount of time for me to get this workout in. And then it could be also, I got to take the kids here, I got to take the kids there. I just don't think that there is an efficient enough calendar developed for most athletes. And I don't mean workout calendar, I mean your actual everyday calendar that like leads you down. And one of the things that I was going to say is one of the more important things that I got shared with me when I started to get busier and have less free time doing this as my job. One of the things Dan really taught me, he's like, dude, just start scheduling your sessions on your calendar. So one, I had that time blocked off, so I know I'm not going to be able to get a call scheduled during that time. It is legitimately scheduled for that 75-minute bike or whatever I got to get done. And then it took me a couple of weeks, Phil, to really learn this, because the first couple of times, it's like, I got that extra 5 minutes to shoot out this email, or I got this extra 10 minutes to add another few workouts to somebody else's calendar. What I ended up finding out as I got busier was, oh crap, I didn't have that 5 minutes, or I didn't have that 10 minutes, so I'm shaving off the back portion of my workout to get into this next call or do that next task that I do have on my calendar that is time sensitive and it's not negotiable at that point. So it took me a couple of weeks to really get into that frame of mind, but now, okay, 2:00, I got to get on, or I got to get like dressed like that. Whatever I have the actual like dress, get downstairs because most of my work is done, or if I'm driving to a run, I have that kind of planned into the time. But once that thing clicks over, I get into that and start that session at that point, whether it be setting up my water bottles, changing the clothes, getting the dogs ready for an outdoor run, whatever it might be. And I have that time allotted into that calendar block off time, and then I get started. So that's one of the things that really, really helps me, is actually scheduling those sessions. And I feel like most of the time when you talk to athletes, hey, what happened here? How the day got the best of me. Okay, well, give me a little, what does that mean? Like, did you, well, I woke up and I read the paper online. I was getting caught up with the news of the day or whatever. Well, okay, did you really need that information? Like, did you want to do that over your workout? No. Well, why'd you do it? Okay.
Yeah.
Point made.
In a world of distractions, right? Everything is vying for your attention, whether that's your phone, social media, like everything, right? So I love that idea of becoming, like planning stuff out, scheduling things out, and building into your workout times. And you got to be realistic with it, right? You can't be like, oh, well, I work 80 hours a week and, I'm planning on exercising 4 hours every afternoon. Like that just, that those two don't align. But what you could do, or what you can do, is you can say, okay, well, I'm going to set aside these 2 hours every single day because exercising and working out is my priority. And, first of all, you got to be, honest with yourself and your coach. Like, this is what I have to use. And then on top of that, you just got to take advantage, right, of the time that's actually being set aside. So if you have those 2 hours set aside, and I did it, this is actually a perfect conversation to have because I did an awful job of my time management stuff today. Like, normally I'm like, okay, I start my workout around 9 and then I'm done by 10:30. Like that's my, scheduled workout time. But, things get in the way, right? Had a phone call that, was a little bit longer than I expected. So wasn't able to start my strength training until, like 10:15 or something like that. And I was like, oh, geez, I got to be done in 15 minutes so then I can, get ready to record the podcast and other things like that. And as opposed to being like, oh, well, like the strength workout is ruined. Instead, what I did is I just did one set of everything. And that was my compromise in the moment because I was like, well, things happen. And that's okay. I still got some work in. I did my push-ups, my pull-ups, my abs, my lunges, all that sort of stuff. So I did something. And I really think it's very valuable to just double down on this is like if you schedule it, then it means it's important enough for you to actually do on a daily basis. And this is something that I've been trying to work with my fiance with because we moved into a new house and like our schedules are pretty tumultuous. I don't know if that's actually a word. I think it is, but so but the bottom line is when you're running your own business or doing whatever it is, if you don't schedule things in, then they really never get done. So, because you wake up in the morning, you check your email. Oh shit, I got to respond to these 10, 15 emails. And then you say, and then it's like, oh, well, somebody wants to have a quick call. And then somebody else wants to have a quick call. Then then you got to deal with the kids or you got to do, chores, you got to do whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, because even though, your training is important to you, because you didn't have that scheduled in at a specific time, you didn't end up doing it. And then you're just stressed out because you got to explain that to your coach or you got to, you feel bad and beat yourself up and other things like that. So, bottom line. And I think that also comes with a lot of boundaries. Like you have to be able and willing to create boundaries for yourself to say what is important for me and what is not so important to me that I won't let that be a distraction. And by setting up those boundaries, like you say, it's like you say, for example, you have 2 hours. You're like, okay, well, I build in the prep time, getting changed, getting the dogs ready, driving to where I'm going, doing my workout, and then coming back. That's all within that block of time that you have set aside, as opposed to being like, oh, well, my workout's supposed to be 2 hours and that's just what you put on, because that's not everything, right? So yeah, I really like that. And I feel like, we could probably spend, like an hour face to face with people, trying to figure out, like what it is and how to schedule and other things like that. But I think the first thing that comes from this is block out your calendar for the workouts when you want to do them. And then from there, you can adjust it as you go, because you'll find, that different things happen and change.
What I would add to that is recognize what type of individual that you are. Like have that like inner conversation with yourself. Am I a morning person? Do I like to get out of bed and roll right into this workout? Or do I like to get things done during my lunch? Or are you someone that likes to get things done at the end of the day? Or are you a combination of all of those things? So you knowing when you have to get these things on the calendar also helps, because I often, if the athlete doesn't mind one way or another, I tend to try to push them to get things done early, because you know what? When you have that workout done, what can't be done? It can't be taken from you,
right?
And time the rest of the day could get wacky and take you away from what you wanted to accomplish and can prevent you from getting into something that you want to do. But if you have that workout done, if time gets crazy or that project that you're working on blows up and you have to spend an extra hour on it, you know what? You've gotten your work done from a fitness standpoint for the day, and then you can just focus on these other things. And it's prioritizing the things that they need, or like that you need at that particular time. You do not know that work is going to go sideways at the start of the day. So if you get that workout done, you allow just a little bit of a buffer into your day to kind of take advantage of something taking place. And if something doesn't take place, you know what? I'm going to go out and walk the dogs, or I'm going to go out and do something else that's away from swim, bike, or run, or just running. So therefore you can start to expose yourself to something a little bit different and enjoy the different things of life.
Yeah, I really like that idea of prioritization as well, because something that I've always tried to do is, or more recently tried to do, is figure out like what is it that actually matters to me, and then say, okay, I'm going to spend like the first hour of my day doing this. I'm going to spend the next hour, 2 hours of my day doing that. And if I prioritize those two big things and get those out of the way before going into, job or, other things that can produce variable amounts of time that they take, I'm actually able to make progress with the things that, again, are my priorities. For me, it's moving my businesses forward, and it's moving, my fitness, or, keeping my health, to a certain extent. So yeah, I really like that, sitting down and figuring out, it's like, what are your priorities? And you can't make everything a priority. That's the thing. It's like, you have to figure out what those priorities are, and then from there pick, probably like the top two. And if it's developing your fitness or whatever it is, or there's other non-negotiables, then you have to, do those first.
Well, and I also think that you can rank your
Mm-hmm.
priorities. So I mean, it doesn't always, and I think that this could change week in and week out for the athlete that is working a full-time job, has kids, has maybe parents getting older and having to pay more attention to them. Like, there's a lot of different things that are priorities that can fit on that list. And by setting up what those priorities are, then also allows you to recognize, okay, this on this particular week is maybe not the same priority. Maybe last week that same priority was number 1, but this week it's 6. Maybe in 2 weeks it's number 2, when the week
Mm-hmm.
before it's number 3. This thing can change, but actually setting up what is the priority for that week and maybe the coming weeks will allow you to then kind of recognize, okay, this has to stay on the calendar. This has to get done, and it needs the importance. So this time is blocked off, not able to be touched. Number 2, okay, this is the next important thing. I'm going to start to drop this into the calendar, start to get those things completed and done, and continue to move that down the list until you don't have any more availability, or you get to a point where you're just like, you know what? Maybe on Thursday, after doing all this week's work, taking the kids to wherever they got to go, work itself, training, maybe this hour I want to block off to just kick my feet up and watch that episode of Seinfeld, or 2 episodes of Seinfeld, or
That's
whatever
Aaron's
it might
favorite
be.
show, everybody.
So, no, it's Parks and Recreation.
Yeah,
We've talked
that's a
about
good
it.
one.
But close second. But I think setting up the priorities in order that they fall that week, and also recognizing that week in and week out, those priority numbers could
Mm-hmm.
change.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, like the people that I've seen, be the most effective with their time management skills is almost every day they're reevaluating, like what are my priorities for the day and other things like that. And it's not from a scheduling standpoint. It's more from they've already blocked out, this is when my deep work is going to happen. This is when my training or exercise is going to happen. This is when family time is going to happen. But then, after you've kind of gotten like the broad schedule scheduled out, then what they do is they start to say, okay, now within these different blocks, then they have priorities, right? So then it's like, okay, well, for me personally, it's like, well, I really want to get my, my exercise physiology for coaches and athletes course up and running and, ready for people. So that's been my major priority. So it's like, okay, now I'm going to spend an hour just writing as much as I possibly can. And then, so then those priorities, right? And it's like priorities within priorities. So to get back to training, It's like, Aaron, how would you recommend or point people towards the right direction of like setting up their training? Because I think there's a lot of inefficiencies that people have. For example, if you have to, you know, drive 45 minutes to and from, to run on trails or do something like that. Like, what's a good way, to then manage that time? Because now you're putting in, potentially, I don't know, like 3 hours worth of training versus if you just ran on a treadmill, for example. Like, so what are some good time management tips that you have that, when people they've finally gotten to the point where they've prioritized, like gotten their training on the books. Now what?
So it's now coming into the intricacies of that particular workout, right? So we need to figure out how long it's going to take you to get prepared, how long it's going to take you to get to where you can start the session, how long it's going to take you for the session, how long it's going to take you to get back, and then get prepared with whatever you need to finish up or do after that session. So in the case of most triathletes, they have to drive to the pool, right? I mean, sometimes we can have the luxury of having a treadmill, having our trainer. We can get those things done by just walking down steps or walking into another room. Most people are going to have to go somewhere to go to a pool. So how long does it take you to get to the pool? How long, like, do I have available before I need to drive that same distance back to home or drive that distance to someplace else where I might have someplace to be? Then that session needs to get broken down of how much time you have within that session or what you have available for that session. And again, I still think it comes back to working your calendar and knowing, okay, I got to be, and I typically work backwards. So even like when I'm building a plan, I start from race day, taper, competition phase, specific phase, and then general phase. So I kind of do the same thing with the calendar of, okay, I have this 9:30 appointment. I want to have breakfast after, like in between the time that I got home and I get on that call. So that's going to take, let's say I'm cooking eggs. I need to eat those eggs. So I need about 15 minutes of time to do that amount of time. Now, when I crack the eggs, I can get changed and do all that other stuff. So that kind of falls into that time frame. But so I have 20 minutes to the pool, 20 minutes to the back. So that is, I need to take that 20 minutes that it takes to get back from the pool. And now that puts me at 8:55. I want to get in this amount of a session. Okay, so I need to be leaving the house at this particular time. Then, boom, that's the swim workout for that day. Or that's the time that I need to get out of the house, because typically I already have that routine planned. I just now look at it as, okay, I have this amount of time. This is when I need to get out of the house. This is when I need to be in the water. And this is when I need to be out of the water. So if it's a day where, hey, somebody in the pool laying next to me wants to talk, shut your mouth. I got to get this thing done. And I mean, I guess I've at least set up that I'm a nice guy, but my people that might talk to me at the pool know, hey, I got to get this thing done, so we'll catch up next week or something else. So they at least recognize, oh, Aaron's not being an asshole. He's just got stuff to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think like I was telling Aaron offline, I was like, yeah, being from the Midwest and stuff, that's like probably the hardest thing, because you're just like, I got to talk to people and I got to make sure I'm not being a dick to them and like other things like that. But it's like, no, it's okay. It's like Bob, like like, great to see you, great to talk to you. I got to get this workout in because I got some stuff going on, that I gotta do later. It's like most people are very understanding of that sort of stuff. It's just, for me personally, I'm just like, oh, well, I don't want to hurt Bob's feelings, like, like
I gotta say, the first like year or 3 that I am at like a new place, I don't say a word because I want to get in, I want to get out. I don't want to have these like minor conversations. Then people, it depends on how friendly the people are around you, but then they start seeing you every day. So then they start asking questions and then you start developing these relationships. I gotta say, I kind of like when people don't know me and I can work around not having to schedule conversations that I
Hmm.
can't control
Yeah, you're
into
like,
my day.
you're like,
Right.
well, I can't control those conversations, so how am I supposed to schedule it right? And this,
Well, and I will have phone calls and I will legitimately, with some individuals, say, "You are on the clock. You have 14 minutes
hmm
before my next call.
hmm
Go." There's no, "Hey, how you doing, Aaron? What's going on?" Okay, you called me for a specific reason and I'm going to answer that,
Yep.
but I got to go.
No, I think that's good. I think that's
So,
good though. I think that again, setting up those boundaries, and this is something that I really has been resonating with me is like setting up boundaries with people and being like, look, I'm not available after this time or during this time, so we're gonna have to make it work. And again, most of the time, if somebody wants to talk to you bad enough, they make it work, right? Same thing with like emails, for example. Everybody thinks that emails need to be immediately responded to, and one of the best things that I learned during my PhD is like answer your emails like one time mid morning when you kind of need a little bit of a break from hard work, and then one time in the afternoon, and then between times, if someone wants to get a hold of you, they'll get a hold of you if they have your number and stuff like that. But most of the time, it can wait, for the 12 hours that you don't check your email, for example.
I agree. I mean, it's so that's how I schedule certain things early. Now, when you start to get into, well, I got this portion of the workday. I got to get to the kids to baseball practice at this time. That's when you need to start getting into your calendar and start recognizing what available time that you have. And again, if you have a coach, these are things that you need to speak to that coach
Mm-hmm.
early on, because last thing that the coach wants to do is spend 2 3 hours developing your month's plan, and then it shows up in your calendar and you're like, well, I got to take the kids here, I got work, I got the PTA meeting, I'm traveling for work this day. And well, then I just spent a bunch of time that I'm just going to have to
Mm-hmm.
redo this stuff. So, one, communicating what you have on your calendar so therefore your coach can properly, like, the coach wants to work with you. The coach wants to make sure that you are able to do the workout. So, having that communication line, having that, like, setup of how that needs to be fit into your calendar is one of the most important things. But then once, if you do have a coach and the coach has then met all of those things, then you need to start putting these things into your daily calendar to
Mm-hmm.
get them done. If you are a self-coached individual, it's a matter of you looking at what, again, coming back, looking at the calendar, what's on it, what do I have time for, and then starting to place in the amount of time for that session that you need. You can always, that session on time does not necessarily matter if you have that time available. So that 45 minutes could be a VO2 max session. It could be a strength session. It could be it could fit a lot of different styles of sessions. The one that I probably would say is I'm not going to give you credit for that aerobic just because 45 minutes might be a
45
little bit
minutes is
short.
that like
But
kind of minimal barrier, right, that you're trying to hit. But again, I would even argue back and say, it's like, well, depending on the athlete's goals and those sort of things, like doing 45 minutes of something is better than doing 45 minutes of nothing at that point. Um,
unless
Fair.
recovery is more important. So I'm not going to argue with on that, Phil. I agree. But unless, let's just say we
Yeah.
beat the snot out of them the last 3 days, they got 45 minutes and they wanted to maybe just kicking
Yep.
your feet up, putting your feet into
Yeah.
some Normatec
That's
or something like that might actually
that's that
win for the
Thursday
day.
Seinfeld watch one and a half episodes, right? Sort of deal. No, but in all actuality, right? I really like that approach because if somebody, I think what I always try to do is I try to meet the person where they're at and what they have available and what they are comfortable with it. And I always try to tell people or ask people is like, what if you had to do this training routine for the rest of your life, how much time either per day or how many times per week do you think you could actually do this for? Because then you'll probably get a little bit more of like that. Well, sometimes the kids have baseball and like other times like work gets busy and other things like that. So you get a little bit more of a realistic estimation of, like the type of time and effort that they can put in to actually training, as opposed to, you get somebody who's super hyped, motivated. They, want to do an Ironman, want to do a half Ironman. And they're like, yeah, coach, I want to do 20 hours a week. I can do it. I can make it work. Right. And first of all, 20 hours a week is just a lot of training. Like, let's just be honest with that. Like that's so much time. But then on top of that, that leaves very little room to wiggle, right? When life things happen and other things like that. So I always like people to give me some level of like realistic estimation of what time they have, because then myself as a coach or you as like a self-coached athlete, then you can say, okay, well, now how do we maximize that time with whatever it is we're doing, right? From a recovery standpoint, from a zone 2 standpoint or aerobic standpoint, from high intensity interval training to strength training, and that's something that I wanted to ask you, right? Is like so when you're coaching half Ironman, triathletes, and obviously this is going to be an it depends answer because it depends on high intensity versus lower intensity, but like if you have an athlete who is kind of time crunched, what are the types of things that you would do in order to help them make the most out of their training? Because there's some people who there's some people, you're all right, there's some people who would say like, oh well, you have to do your warm up and your dynamic drills and your strengthening every single day, and that's like something that they're very rigid upon. But like for other people, it's like, well, if you're just doing a zone 2 workout, then you can go a little bit easy in the beginning, and then you can ramp that up, and you don't have to necessarily do a 45-minute warm up, right? So yeah, so how do you manage that sort of stuff? Because it's tough, right?
I mean, that really is. I don't think that sets up with just a one size fits all
Absolutely
answer.
not.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, I know you said you started out by saying it depends, but it really truly does, because in that case, you also have to know what is the limiter for that individual? Like what can it be? So I have one individual that is just extremely high. I mean, he is fully in his work and development there. And we have him currently getting ready for a half Ironman. And for him, his body allows him to cut warm ups and cool downs a little bit short and spend more time within the actual like key piece of the main set. Where I have other athletes in the back of my head that I'm thinking of that they need a longer warm up. They do not just flip that switch and get going really, really quickly. I would not have them take that same approach. So I would need to back down those main sets or intense sets for that individual to make sure that we aren't going into their main set not prepared and then coming out on the other side of that as a wasted workout, or them feeling a bit discouraged because they didn't feel like it was as easy or they didn't get as much out of it. So this is a matter of the coach knowing and recognizing their athlete, and if you are a self-coached athlete, recognizing who you are as well. Because I really feel like it can set you up for disaster if you are an individual that needs a little bit more of a longer warm-up, and you go in and start getting into whatever the intense portion of that workout is. You feel like garbage. I mean, yeah, you might hit the sets, but then you walk out thinking, man, that was terrible. And then you beat yourself up the rest of the day for everything else that you have going in. Also, depending on how demanding the work is, I mean, is that workout so intense and so short that they're going into their work day falling asleep at their desk, or if they're a doctor, are they not able to concentrate on their patient because I fatigued them that much? So I really, I'm hesitant to go into too much detail on that just because it is so individualized and so specific to the actual presentation of that
Yeah,
question.
and I mean, it also depends on the type of workout, right? Some people, like you were saying, are really good at just jumping into higher intensity stuff. They take the first couple of sets, they're all warmed up, they're good to go, and then they're hitting the hard sets. Other people take a really long time to warm up, or other people even need, a warm up for, like a little bit more of those moderate to easier sessions. Yeah,
Warm
yeah,
up for a
exactly,
warm up.
exactly. So no, I like that, and it's it again. It highlights, either really coming in tune with your body and how you function in work, or having a coach who's really willing to communicate with you, go over how are you feeling. Honestly, if you could get a coach who's like, in person every once in a while, I really like that, just to be able to have eyes on, oh, how's this person actually reacting to, like the warm up? How are they reacting to, like a shorter warm up or something along those lines? And at the end of the day, I think, I always say, it comes down to consistency, specificity, and progression, and tweaking those workouts, right? Like somebody could write, the optimal VO2, like, or plan for adapting your VO2 max or whatever it is. But if that doesn't allow you to stay specific and stay healthy, then you should not be doing that quote unquote optimal workout, right? It's obviously not optimal for you.
Well, it's not an optimal. It's not an
Yeah,
optimal workout
exactly.
anymore.
And I think that's what people lose track of, is like they read, oh, like the Norwegian method, that's optimal maybe for, guys who are running 80 to 120 kilometers per week and have accumulated that amount of volume over the course of 10 to 20 years of training. And, so you can't expect that to be the optimal workout for you. And you need to figure out, or you and your coach need to work and figure out, okay, well, what's going to be, I mean, the optimal amount of work that's going to allow you to get to the workout in a warmed up stage, stay healthy throughout the workout, and then progress and be able to do it either the same next time or slightly better, the next time you actually do it. So those are like the nuances, right, of like the time management within your actual workout and stuff. And, somebody who is prone to, say like soft tissue injuries, like Achilles, plantar fasciitis, I'm speaking about myself, then maybe prioritizing like the strength training and the dynamic drills before a workout is more important than actually getting in tons and tons and tons of running volume, because you need to strengthen the body and you need to, have it adapt and get ready to the actual workout before you actually just jump into it and do it. So all that being said, self-coach athletes is actually really hard, to be very objective about this sort of thing. And, I'm, again, speaking from experience because I've been self-coached for a long time. I've always found that if I'm more conservative with how I approach things, at least for me, the better the outcomes and the more consistent I can stay. For other athletes, I am sure, like having a good coach and having somebody who's continually talking to you will help you actually get a good view of like, oh, maybe I do need to do this warm up and focus on, these sort of drills because I have muscle imbalances, or, I just don't feel good until the fifth set of 10, or something like that. So yeah, so of course, there's always it depends and caveats and all of that. But I think, again, it comes back to knowing who you are as a person, what you can manage, and then what you're actually able to recuperate from. And again, that's all going to shift too. If you're coming, so I coach an athlete who, she's finishing up her PhD, and one of the things I told her, I was like, look, like finishing up a PhD is a pretty large stress, and it's more important right now. The priority is for you to stay healthy and to be mentally all in when you're writing, your thesis and writing your papers and developing your presentations. So what we need to do is we need to now treat exercise as just that. We don't want it to be so hard that you're dead the rest of the day. We don't want it to be so hard that you're getting sick, or injured or anything like that, because we want this to facilitate your mental energy being able to finish your PhD, as opposed to, say, once she's done with that, we'll switch towards something that's maybe a little bit more physically demanding because she's not, so invested in finishing the PhD now, and we can focus on other areas of development, right?
And with that, it's again, it's easy for us to be on that side of it and make those decisions for other people. I think it really is for that athlete that wants to be self-coached, the athlete that wants to do this on their own. Being honest with yourself, recognizing just because you say or you see other people that you're competing against do this or do that, you have to be realistic in that you can actually put up that particular amount of time, that investment, all of the things that come with that performance. You just can't say, hey, I want to train 22 hours because I'm seeing all these other people doing 22 hours, or I just think that that's the right number for me. If you sit down and recognize, well, shoot, I only have about 16 hours free. How am I going to get another 6 hours on top of that? It's not going to happen. And also recognizing in that case that if that 16 hours also doesn't give you anything else, like any other free time, recognize all you're going to be doing is what you have to do, and then the 16 hours of training. There's not 30 minutes or an hour, 45 minutes throughout the course of the week where you're doing anything else. And being realistic with yourself and understanding, oh, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and maybe I should schedule 15 hours rather than those 22 that I want, but 16 realistic, because I would like to watch this movie, or I would like to read this book, or I would like to just sit down with my significant other and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I probably should have mentioned that one first.
Those are
but
maintaining relationships, right? Pretty important. No, I 100% agree with that. I think and again, I think one of the biggest things that we get distracted with is the comparison between my life and somebody else's life when I look on social media. And one thing I just want to remind people of is that you only see the stuff people want to show you when you're on social media. You don't see all the negative ramifications of whatever lifestyle it is that person's living. You don't see if they're struggling with relationships or, raising kids or other things like that. So, yes, that 22 to 26 hours of training that they're doing is maybe something that they're actually capable of for the long term. But if that's not realistic for you and that doesn't fit into your priorities and your guiding principles, then don't try to emulate them just because you think, oh, the only reason I'm not at their level is because 22 hours or 25 hours. If I can guarantee you this, if you trained 15 hours a week and maintained that and that was maintainable for extended periods of time. And what I mean by that is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. That is going to way outlast, and you'll probably eclipse that person's ability to perform if they only do that for a year. If they do 22 hours for a year, yeah, it's probably just a flash in a pan performance, and then, maybe they get so burnt out that they can never train again. But again, you shouldn't be comparing yourself to somebody else as it is. You should be becoming aware of yourself as an individual, what your priorities are. And I talked to a sports psychotherapist named Neil Pallas, and he was really helpful, and our conversation was awesome because what he was saying was you have to figure out what your guiding principles are, which then help you prioritize everything else in your life. Because then every time you get to a decision point in the road, if you have those guiding principles to lean on, then you can make a much better decision, right? If if your number one priority is family, and you get to this, like fork in the road, should I exercise 25 hours a week or should I do 15 and be able to hang out with my family? That's a pretty easy decision, in my opinion. You take the 15 and then you prioritize your family over that, right? Or if you're all in to the training, doesn't matter about anything else, then it's like, yeah, I want to try to do the 20 to 25 hours, right? So
I got a question for him in that case though. How does the type A personality, like how would he instruct that individual how to live with that decision and not then look back and question that decision? Because yes, we understand family should sit at the top of that bar, but when you make that decision but then you walk away from the decision and beat yourself up, I would want to know what his like conversation with somebody is in that instance, because I think that that's where most individuals do that, because we have to make decisions based on we don't have anything else. But then when we get away from making that decision, that's when the self-sabotage, self-questioning, all these other things that go with that come through. And it's sad at that point, because no, in that decision 100 times you made the right choice because that's what you needed to do. Don't sit back and look, well, I should have done this or I could have done this differently. The only thing that I would question in that case is if you're going to self-assess, for me, this is talking to somebody else, go back and self-assess your time management and look and see, did I miss the window on any one of these other points? Did I lose focus for 15 minutes and didn't get into that workout? Or did I lose focus, or did I carry on a conversation for 20 minutes longer than I needed to? Or did I do something that I can improve on the next time through to open up that time and be, I don't want to say be better, but be more able to complete all the tasks that you have for that particular day. So I think that is great recommendation, but it's also kind of coping with it is a big problem and a challenge for a lot of individuals. So how I would look at that is, that's great, make that decision that does come first, and it kind of falls back to what we were talking about earlier about prioritizing, and then also putting a rank on that prioritization, but then also self-assessing and almost giving yourself a report card of, man, I did everything perfect today. There is no way I would have been able to chisel out 25 minutes, maybe even 6 minutes. I wasn't able to chisel out that amount of time. Okay, great. I did everything that I could. Now, if the opposite is, man, yeah, I did kind of fart around when I, looked at this website, or I got down the rabbit hole of Instagram, we know that that's typically not my problem, but it is. I think some people do kind of, oh man, I got into that algorithm of Instagram and got lost. So that would be what I would recommend, is if you didn't succeed that day or you didn't meet your expectations, it's okay. But maybe you should look at, okay, if this is important, maybe I need to go in there and investigate or analyze what caused me to not get this stuff done.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. And I'm not a psychotherapist or anything like that. I think it is important, to talk to people who could potentially be able to walk you through these sort of things, because they've probably talked to a lot of people and have some pretty good tools in order to figure this sort of stuff out. But what I will say is, like, if you have, or at least for me, when I have like those guiding principles laid out for myself, and then I make a decision, what I can do is I can say, I feel comfortable in my decision because I made it in that moment for the right choice. So then if something else comes up, because life is, everything is always coming at you, 100 miles an hour, and you're like, oh, I got to make decisions on the fly, and I got to do this, and it's like, but if you're rooted in stuff that really is guiding you in the proper direction, then yes, it sucks when something doesn't happen perfectly the right way, but you can at least fall back on those values and say, well, I made this decision and here's my justification for it. And then I think that starts to get rid of the extra noise, right? Of, oh, you got to be doing this much. You got to be doing this. Why aren't you doing way more higher intensity stuff? Why aren't you doing way more zone 2 stuff, like other things like that? It's like, nope. I'm doing what I can in the moment based on the decisions and the priorities that I'm setting. And you just, it's an exercise in just being okay with that and admitting that, you're not perfect. Because I could look back on every single day of my life and be like, oh my gosh, well, that wasn't perfect. That wasn't perfect. That wasn't perfect. And if I'm just doing that and beating myself up, nothing happens from it, and it's a useless experience, or it's not worth your time, because now you've just wasted that 6 minutes that you could have been kicking your feet up, right? But what I will say is I like what you were saying, Aaron, is that if you can look back on a day and say, oh yeah, I was a little distracted there. Okay, so what can I put into play tomorrow to try to just be a little bit better? Then eventually, if you're getting, like 0.5% better per day, there's this really cool, graph that's like 0.5% better eventually, has this inflection point where it's just like super steep climb in terms of, actual growth. And it just takes time. And I think if you're just getting incrementally better in terms of time management every single day, then you will eventually get to a point where you could be, like Aaron, where things are planned out and things, you're hitting, like, okay, I know I have 2 hours to do this. It's going to take me this much time to do this and that. And just, it's called practice, for a reason. You're practicing getting better. You're practicing, working on things that are going to make you a better person. And I don't think striving to get everything nailed down perfect is what we should be aiming for. It should be, if you can look back on a day and be like, okay, what could I get better at and how could I get better at that? And then what did I get better at today that I wasn't better at yesterday? If you can look back and like chalk up those wins, then that should be very encouraging for, setting these priorities and doing other things like that, because it's really easy to get bogged down in the negatives. But if you can walk away with some wins every single day, even if they're small wins, celebrate those and then see what you can do to win tomorrow too.
Always
Yes.
celebrate the victories.
Because it is very amazing, like how easy it is to focus and get wrapped up in the negatives, but just by, being like, oh, what were my wins today? That is something that I used to do, was just like write down like 3 wins for the day. And just by doing that, my mental perspective shifted so much, because I was like, well, I didn't finish writing that book or that course, but I did write for an hour and I wrote 2 pages, like that's 2 pages more than I was the other day. So then if you did that for 30 days, that's like 60 pages of writing. So, so all of those little wins, they'll compound. So I think, that's kind of getting off the topic of time management. But again, it just comes back to prioritization, iterating, figuring out what works for you. And you're not going to get it right, the first time. And that's okay. Just continually try to get better and continually try to manage that time more and more. Aaron's grinning because he does everything perfectly. I know it.
No, I was going to say, you're not going to get it right the first 50 times. Shoot. For the first time. Come on. You're not going to get it right maybe the first 100 you do it. Come on.
No, and that's, again, that's okay. Because you practice, you get better, you learn from, what could be better. And, then I think that's a big thing is, that comes from both, comes from sport. is like if you stay consistent and you're practicing and training consistently, those are the times where the most growth and the most gains in performance actually happen. So use that as something to be like, oh, well, if I'm growing in life as well, then I'm eventually going to be better for it.
I'm right on board. And it's just because you didn't succeed today doesn't mean you can't succeed tomorrow, doesn't mean that you can't succeed next week. It is a matter of assessing and making the adjustments to removing the things that are getting in the way for you to accomplish all these tasks. And those things that you can't remove are obviously probably going to be important things too. So it's I mean, I guess there's a lot of things I just don't have to compete with myself. Like, I don't have kids. I'm not a coffee drinker. So I'm not like, I'm not worried about starting to get my coffee maker going at the start of the day. I don't get into Instagram or other social media, so I'm not spending losing time there. But I think that assessing what's really important to you, and again, if it is getting behind, maybe even flipping the day and putting some of those things at the end of the day maybe is a better when if you miss something, you didn't miss part of your workout, you missed 10 minutes of searching stuff on Instagram, or you missed whatever it might have been from something that might not be as important really in your life.
I think the big takeaway for me today is prioritize what it is you want to achieve or accomplish the most. Put that in the beginning of your day, and then the rest of the day might be out of your control, but at least you still got those wins in the morning, right? So we'll leave you guys with that. This is a fun conversation, from the applicable to the philosophical sort of side of life and stuff like that. So I appreciate it, man.
And May's got to ante in a little bit too with a bark too. So if you guys understood what she said, more power to you.
If you guys have any questions or any other topics you want us to cover, you can always find me on Instagram at Critical02. You can find Aaron at @TryAGeiser. You can comment down below if you have questions if you're on YouTube, and you can leave us some feedback if you're on Spotify. If you've gotten this far in the episode, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify. Really helps push us out to more people. And if you're interested in doing early morning rides, Aaron is still doing the Endure IQ long ride in the mornings on Saturdays at 8 a.m. Eastern. So go and join that. You can ask him questions there because he opens that as a forum for questions and answers and other things like that. So we hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And if you have any other topics you want us to touch on, let us know, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.